What do I believe my roles are as a soon to be father?
You said it's a lot of pressure. I'm just curious what do you see as what you're supposed to do versus what maybe feels a little unfair and overwhelming.
It's funny you asked me that question because in the last few months, I mean, I have been going through some serious spiritual war and mental warfare. And I've first of all, I had no idea what the first trimester is about. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another episode of Purpose Over Pleasure podcast. Today we have a special guest, somebody that I've been looking forward to having a conversation with, Miss Jennifer Meyers. She is a therapist out of Colorado in private practice, and today we're actually going to change the dynamic a little bit. She told me she's got some questions for me, something that I in the sphere that I work with, and you best believe, will take advantage of this time and ask some questions to her and pick her brain. So, without further ado, Jennifer, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Alex. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you this morning.
Likewise, likewise. And before we begin, I want to tell the viewers and the listeners to stick around because today we're going to touch on two important topics. One is the questions that you're going to ask me about the topic of toxic masculinity, as much as I hate using that term, and the questions that I have for you is topic on the topic of relationship, which is your expertise. So let's uh let's dive into it.
Great.
I know you had some questions cooked up for me, so shoot.
Yes. So, in this climate, it's so interesting, Alex, because I feel like the topic toxic masculinity is thrown out so often that I feel like we're misunderstanding that all masculinity is toxic when in my opinion it's very specific and all different groups of people can have toxic traits. So I think it's gone a little too far and we need to maybe address that. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts as a man.
I love the question. I love the question because up until maybe right before I met you, or right after I met you a few months ago, I disliked the term toxic masculinity. I never even accepted it in my vocabulary because if you look at the origins of the term toxic masculinity, it was actually created by a psychiatrist, I believe, in the prison system. It was two gentlemen. They were studying the violent behavior of inmates. And so they realized that toxic masculinity is the behavior typical to toxic inmates, uh, is a behavior typical to inmates in prison, which is very violent, and I can talk about that from a perspective of a law enforcement officer, but is violence is a number one key feature in the prison system. That's how people dominate. That's how the hierarchy is structured. So they specifically coined that term for the purposes of using on the inmates. Somehow the term got out, and now they start using it in general terms. And somehow, in the last 5 years, that term, like you mentioned earlier, became very commonly used across just the term of masculinity itself. And that I am not willing to accept, and no man who's a leader who considers himself masculine will accept that term.
Mm-hmm.
With that said, as much as I never like to use that term because toxic people exist in every category, in every culture, in
Mm-hmm.
every sex and ethnicity, you name it. What I recently realized that but the best way to describe or to allow the term toxic masculinity to describe something would be when you have not men, not grown men, but you have boys who act like men, try to teach manhood to other boys. And that I believe is toxic. Because if you look at the definition of man, right, if you look at what a man should be, a man is somebody who's a leader, who's responsible, who's made in the image of Christ, who's got his stuff together, takes care of his family, takes care of his own, is a leader of other people, leader of the over himself, is a servant, right? Not somebody like what I used to be, right? Thinking that if I have the most women, if I have the six pack, and if I have the best car, that I'm the man. No,
Mm-hmm.
the man is somebody who's humble, who doesn't put his ego up front, who's a leader, who's there to serve others, and who's there to please God. Not please people and serve God, but serve people and please God.
Mm-hmm.
What you have nowadays is a bunch of boys who act like men, who think they're a man because through social media and TikTok on Instagram or whatever, or parent inheritance, have physical accolades, and they think they're men, and they try to teach all that to other men, other boys. Okay, whereas they have no idea what manhood is truly is about. A good example of that would be somebody like Wes Watson. Okay, he basically, for him, he says, I'm not afraid to admit that because I used to be his fan, but over the last few years he just went out of control, and what I don't like what he stands for anymore. It doesn't matter how many cars you have, doesn't matter how many girls you have, doesn't matter how many watches you wear. That doesn't make you a man. Doesn't make you a man at
Mhm.
all. So that is the difference between masculinity and toxic masculinity, at least in my opinion. And like
Mhm.
you said, yeah, we need to distinguish the difference because the social media portrayed so much of it and coined that term on actual men that men out there, including myself, we're just tired of it. We are extremely tired of it because anything we do or we say is all of a sudden coined toxic, and it really is not.
Right, right. I think it's so important to look at the difference between actual healthy masculinity, which I think I would love to talk more about that. What is healthy masculinity? What does this look like? And mature masculinity, just like, femininity as well. What does it look like to be a healthy, mature adult that is healed from trauma and doing good work in the world? That's kind of what I'd rather focus on than so much focus on toxic masculinity. I know it exists. I agree in every category.
It definitely does. And I think the problem that we're facing right now is over the last couple of decades, we have such shortage of men out there, and this has sort of been my social project over the last few years, and I talked about it as a guest on multiple different podcasts. Absence of men destabilizes the nuclear family, and a nuclear family is non-nuclear family is unable to produce a healthy woman and a healthy man, with a rare exception. And I am a byproduct of a destabilized nuclear family. My father was a very toxic man in certain traits, and I had to unlearn everything I learned or I was taught as a child, and I still am dealing with the side effects of my childhood. And it is not an overnight change. It's taken me over a decade to be where I'm at today, and I still have to put in the work every single day. And it's work. It is actual work. And I never understood when people say self-development is hard. It is. It's
Mhm.
not easy. But people are just too afraid, too excuseful, too comfortable to change their ways, although
Mhm.
their ways are not making them happy.
Agreed. And I'm so glad that you admitted that because it's the same for me coming from a destabilized family and some toxic traits and some things that I've had to work decades to overcome. And then also having that with my own kids, going through divorce and having big chunks of time trying to raise a son and a daughter who are adults now to be healthy, productive, successful people. Boy, it's interesting trying to do that mostly alone.
What is the biggest challenge do you think you're facing right now, or at all, did you
Mm-hmm.
face raising your children without by yourself?
Mm-hmm.
What would you
You
say were the
know,
biggest challenges?
it's interesting, Alex. I was thinking about this, and my son, who is now almost 21, came to me. I think it was right after high school graduation and said, "Mom, you've done so much, but you cannot teach me how to be a man. I need to do this on my own." And he moved out, and it was really difficult. And he went through some difficult times, probably dark night of the soul, I would call it. And then he ended up finding these men in church and is now a changed person. And we met on Wednesday and both cried and just had a lot of realizations about he feels pretty whole. So that's pretty neat. But yeah, how does a woman teach a young man how to be a man? I don't know how to do that. I have tried to balance healthy feminine and healthy masculine in parenting, but I don't know what it's like to be a man.
I love and admire the fact that you understand that you can't teach your son how to be masculine. A lot
Mm,
of I've met a lot of women in my life, whether it's in a line of duty, whether it's the women that I dated or the women that I've kind of not coached, but the partners of the gentlemen that I coached, my coaching clients. They believe, and this sounds oblivious and delusional, they believe they can raise a man. A woman cannot raise a man. as my mother is one of the probably the best, most kind person I ever met. The reason why I am still, the reason why I am who I am today, I'm not an alcoholic or a drug like my father used to be, or a drug abuser like my brother used to be, or in jail or in prisons, because my mother gave me his unconditional love, and she still does, and she never tried to make me bitter at anybody, including my dad.
Mm.
And my dad made my mother's life an absolute nightmare. And with that, it's important to point out that despite the fact that all the amazing things she did for me, when it came time for me to learn to be a man, I had to do what your son did.
Mm.
I had to learn on my own. And I still am. I still am learning on my own, because usually they say a woman takes a baby and raises it to be how to be a boy, but then a man steps in around the age of 8, 9 and raises the boy into a man. There's certain there's certain things that men have to go through to in order to become a man. One of them is the term that we forgot. It's called rite of passage.
Yes.
So many cultures throughout the nation have to go. The young boys have to go through rite of passage.
Yes.
We in this country are so comfortable, are so blessed, are so lucky to have what we have now, right? We have what, food delivery after a couple of clicks on this phone, and that we have forgotten what it's like to go through a rite of passage. And as men, we need to bring that back, because we have to make young boys earn the right to be called men in the society. Because when you have a bunch of boys running around acting like men, that's when you have domestic violence, that's when you have drug
Mm.
abuse, that's when you have depression, that's when you have suicides, that's when you have false gods and false idols, and the stupid ideology of you know I don't want to get into feminism right now, but
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty toxic. And I think by not by breaking down the family and taking away the fathers, we completely destabilized our society.
Mm. I am so glad that you brought up the rite of passage because I think it's hugely important and I think we've lost that. And I don't feel like we even have an emphasis on how important it is to do some sort of something to get out of comfort zones. I actually sent my son when he turned 15 on a rite of passage, and they took him out blindfolded in the woods and made him find his way back, and he spent a night alone, and it was so good for him and taught him some leadership qualities. And I just finished reading the book called The Comfort Crisis, and it's
Mm.
spot on in that sense of we are too damn comfortable
Hmm.
these days, even women. It's all of us. And we need to go through something like that to find our leadership. Are you going to show it to me? Do you have it?
No, no, I have it's way too far, but I was going to show you this book.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
this book, I believe,
Uh-huh.
should be a prerequisite and a requirement for every boy and a girl
Mm-hmm.
in high school, if not middle school.
Okay.
Okay. Late May's, soul rest in peace, Stephen Arnio. He wrote this book called Hard Times Create Strong Men.
Okay.
This book is mandatory for every boy to read,
Hmm.
for every person to read, because there's certain chapters start diving into the why the world the way it is today,
Mm-hmm.
but every boy should read this book,
Okay.
because as the book says, hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times.
Yes.
You are very intelligent, and I'm sure you can figure out what part of the cycle we're in right now.
Absolutely.
And it's extremely unfortunate, and it's sad. And I have a bunch of books here, Ayn Rand, and just a very good books for Man Up is one of them by Bedros.
Mm-hmm.
Some of this book need to be read by young men,
Mm-hmm.
and I would even go further and say some of this book need to be read by grown men today,
Yes. Yes.
by grown men. And my father passed away a couple of years ago. He could have definitely used this book and a few of these books that I have on my bookshelf that I've read. And it sounds
Mm-hmm.
like you know a bunch of men in your life who can definitely use these books.
Absolutely. Yes. Including my own father. Yep. Just naming it, not to shame, just to name it. I think we should all be, committed to personal growth and learning about our blind spots and always working on ourselves.
Oh, definitely, definitely. What was if you don't mind me asking, what was your relationship like with your father? This is just me just diving into you as a
Hmm.
person.
There was such an expectation for me to be masculine. And so when I say masculine specifically here, it was to show courage, independence, fearlessness, go out and do all of these things. I grew up in the Midwest, out, in the middle of basically nowhere, but it was, don't be afraid to shoot, don't be afraid to clean out ducks that he killed, things like that. And I loved all of that. I loved the adventure. But then there was, even if I did all of that perfectly, there was an expectation that I couldn't join the actual fun things because I was a girl. So it's kind of inhabit all of these male masculine traits, but also look good, look presentable, kind of be like arm candy, and be soft, or basically just stay away from the men because you're not cool because you're a girl. So I've
That's a
had
lot
to
of
do a lot of work on that one.
that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure. That, and I would even be guilty and be truthful and say that I'm guilty of maybe slight doing a little bit of that to my own niece because
Mm,
I had to step in as a father into her life. Until this day, she texts me every Father's Day, texts me, tells me Happy Father's Day, and she's now 21, and I sort of had to raise her in masculine ways, but I always remind her, I'm like, listen, I don't know how to teach you how to be a woman.
mhm,
What I'm doing right now is I'm trying to teach you how to survive as a woman in this world.
mhm,
And I knew, especially in the last 10 years, I knew that there's a fine line that I have to not cross, but it's tough. It's tough. I don't know how to raise a woman. But I just looked at it from perspective of the fact that I have to be an example of a man that I want her to find for herself,
yes.
and I also have to treat her the way that she knows how she deserves to be treated by other men.
Mhm,
And it's hard, Jen. It is hard because I don't know how to teach a girl how to be a woman.
right.
I don't. And I know some things are probably going to backfire in her life because I raised her in masculine ways. But I was willing to take that shot in order to teach her how to be safe and vigilant and self-aware.
I actually think, Alex, those things are really, really important. And for that aspect of my childhood, I'm very, very grateful. There was a lot of focus on, some of these masculine traits that I feel happy that I have because I feel self sufficient. I feel, and I've done a lot in my adult life to learn how to protect myself physically with, shooting and self defense and all of those things. But a lot of that was good, and I've just had to work really hard to kind of recognize that the feminine aspects of me are not bad.
Not bad, you mean? Or oh, okay, I get it. I get it.
That it's okay to be feminine sometimes and lean into that. And I also think it requires a masculine man who's healthy to allow the healthy feminine to exist as well. And I think we do that well in partnership with healthy masculinity and healthy femininity.
Yes, yes. I think the problem we're facing now is, and I've experienced that in my own relationship. When I met my my wife, my wife's dad, parents are divorced, not a toxic, failed marriage, just like every single one in my own family. And I didn't have one single marriage in my family that actually lasted. Kind of sad, right? So
Mhm.
it stops with me. The dad is a Marine, toxic, toxic masculinity. Okay.
Mhm.
Mom is a law enforcement officer. Divorced, remarried, divorced, remarried. I tell you right now, first responders are toxic. I'm telling you that as a cop myself. Okay. It's a whole different thing we can talk about. So she was raised masculine. I had to bend her in ways to drop her masculinity, become feminine.
Mhm.
And I had to be patient. And I'm still now we're at a whole different level of overcoming that because now we're experiencing some significant issues with her family. Now it's more like we went from that to more like we had a little situation where she told her mom, "Listen, Alex is now my husband, and he's now my family, and you guys are now my extended family."
Mm-hmm.
Boy, did she not like hearing that. But it's truth, and I had to sort of put boundaries with my own family about that because I think the number one factor that ruins marriages is not even finances or cheating. It's family. It's
Mm-hmm.
extended family. So be careful what kind of people you allow into your relationship. But I digress. And I remember one time I come home and she's like, in the bathtub, just taking her time, being all feminine with a glass of wine and candles. And she told me herself, she's like, you know what? I realized that I did not grow up feminine like this, but I was able to let go of my masculine traits and fall back into my feminine because of you,
Yes.
because of the type of man you are. And I remember back then I was like, wow, okay, that was a compliment to me.
Mm-hmm.
But now that we're leveling up as a married couple in life, I'm realizing that's also a lot of pressure, Jen. It's a
Yes.
lot of pressure that falls on my shoulders to carry as a man,
Mm-hmm.
especially if I want to be the leader of my family when we have kids and et cetera, especially when we're battling, you know, extended family members and the rest of the world. That really tests you. That really does. I don't know if you ever had to deal with something like that in your life.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you, Alex, what do you see as your role? I know you're expecting a child. And so, what do you see as your role? What's your purpose as an upcoming father and also husband, if there was such a thing as healthy, balanced masculine and feminine in a family and a marriage? You see what I'm asking?
What do I believe my roles are
Mm-hmm.
as a soon to be father?
You said it's a lot of pressure. I'm just curious what do you see as what you're supposed to do versus what maybe feels a little unfair and overwhelming.
It's funny you asked me that question because in the last few months, I mean, I have been going through some serious spiritual war and mental warfare. And I've first of all, I had no idea what the first trimester is about. Okay,
Yeah.
nobody ever told me. No, nobody ever warned me. There's no warning sign. You don't go to OBGYN and tell you, and they put you in different room and say, "Sir, this
Watch
conversation
out.
is for you." Okay, no.
Mm-hmm.
So it is tough. It is tough, and I'm sure you remember I had my first ever panic attack in November of last
Mm-hmm.
year, and 4 days after that I found out we're expecting. So everything kind of fell on my shoulders all at once. But not to digress, what I believe my roles, responsibilities are is first of all to be a provider and a protector.
Mm-hmm.
It now falls on me to be able to put the roof over my family's head and the food on their table, no matter what, and to protect them and to provide for them. But I'm not afraid of that as much as I now have to learn that my duty as a protector and a provider also includes spiritual protection,
Mm-hmm.
emotional protection, mental protection and provision.
Mm-hmm.
Because now I'm dealing with a person who's completely hormonally imbalanced. I don't know what happened to my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recognize her. And my patience is being tested to the outer limits that it's never been tested before. Not even when I was a police officer on the
Wow.
street. So I'm relearning a lot of things that I thought make me a man and a protector and a provider, and to be to mold myself into a father
Mm-hmm.
because I am now inheriting a role of a father, and I never had a father to teach me how to be a father. If that makes any sense. And there was
Yes.
a week ago or two. Damn, I'm getting emotional talking about right now. I was going through something, and I really needed a father's advice. And my
Mm-hmm.
father is not here, right? But even if he was here, I don't think he'll be able to answer me that question. I realized that I never had a father to talk to. But I also realized that I've always had a father to talk to, and that's God.
Yes. Hmm.
And so far, in the last 3 months, as crazy as insane and pressure filled it was for me, I just lean into my faith,
Hmm.
and I have no choice but to, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing that.
thank you. Yeah, I don't even know why I got a little emotional about it, but hey,
Well, it's, boy, this is hard stuff. And I feel like I think there's a lot of pressure. The fact that you're about to become a father and you really don't have a blueprint for that. What does that look like? You haven't
no,
really seen it in a healthy way, at least intimately in your family, correct?
never, never. I don't have a single relationship in my family that ever lasted. Everybody in my family got divorced or had a failed marriage. There was domestic violence, physical abuse, uh, cheating, and all kinds of stuff. That for me, that's normal. For me, that was
Mm-hmm.
normal. So having to relearn all of that and then learn how to be a father, and, and a husband and
Mm-hmm.
and a leader. I mean, that's a lot, but there's beauty in that. There's beauty in that. That you have to lean into adversity as a man. That's what makes a boy a man. That's what
Mm-hmm.
it is. That's sort of also a rite of passage on its own. That's what it is required. You have As a man, you have to accept the fact that at some point life will suck, and there's nothing you can do about it. It will suck.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Mm-hmm.
that's just your turn. But
Right.
the sucking is the way to level up to the next level, in my opinion. There's
Agreed.
no way around it. It'll suck. That's nothing
Yeah.
you can do about it. Yeah.
And I'm thankful for the suck because to me, that's what creates good humans. You can use it and you can, identify by that and become better, or you can use that to get stronger, learn from it, and recognize that it's not that you did something wrong to deserve this negative. It's just, that's just life. We all encounter our obstacles. And I think it's interesting because to me, if you were not having concerns and maybe even a little bit of panic about what kind of father you're going to be, it would tell me that it's really not an important role for you. I think the fact that you're feeling all of this and kind of grappling with it is, it's not comfortable, but it's healthy because you're trying to figure out, how do I do this and do this well? And I haven't seen this. And so, gosh, how do you do it? Right?
One day at a time.
Yeah.
One day at a time. I've had parts of my life that I've been broke more than once.
Mm-hmm.
I've been heartbroken more than once. Um, I can't say I've been starving, but an empty pocket and a broken heart will teach you a lot.
Agreed.
And one day at a time, you just have to have faith. Like I have never had this much faith in God as in 36 years. I'll be 36 in a couple of months of my life, ever.
Mm-hmm.
And if I didn't switch off since my last panic attack and lean into God, I probably would have had multiple panic attacks. This week would have definitely been one of them. This week,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's God or devil or both, are testing me hard
Mm-hmm.
in all aspects of life, in business, in personal life. Trying to keep the peace and a happy home. And this, because it's always been like that. Like since day one, me and my wife, right? I made it a rule that no matter what happens, my home is a peaceful place.
Mm-hmm.
I go out there, I fight these wars, right? When I come home, I want peace and happiness. And she always provided that for me. But now she's struggling with her first trimester and this overflow of hormones, and there's a devil inside of her, not like literally, but
Yeah.
as a joke. So I don't have any of that at the
Mm-hmm.
moment, and I know it's only temporary.
Yeah.
So trying to keep it all together, because I know she can't keep us, it falls on me. It falls on me. So it's pressure from all aspects of life, and you have to pick and choose your battles. And this is what I believe, it's either going to make me or break me. And
Mm-hmm.
if it breaks me, then I guess it'll break me for the better, because sometimes life have to break you and mold you into a better person. And at least that's I'm going through what I do to other guys I coach. I break them a little bit, and then I mold them into men. So
Yes.
life or God is like, all right, I'm gonna do that to you right now. Are you ready? So
Yep.
yeah, that's what I'm going with.
Oh, it is so true. It's so true. And I think I mentioned in our chats this week, there must have been something in the water this week because I had almost like a full meltdown on Wednesday. And, but it led in that breaking of me led to some really good stuff. And it feels like I have a, a relationship with God for the maybe the first real time in my life, which is remarkable. And all of these people and all of these signs appeared. And so that's another subject, but I'm with you. It's like you and I can't coach people or counsel people if we haven't gone through the hard times ourselves. And boy, there's no shortage of that with either one of us.
Yeah.
So
What in your opinion, in your practice, what is the number one or the most common factors why relationships don't work out? And you can give me example of your personal life or your professional life. It's just so
sure. I'll give an example that actually crosses over both, which I think, and it also brings in this topic of toxic masculinity, which is I think the relationship we have with our parents, and you and I have already touched on that, but that relationship we have with our parents is so crucial and so influential in how we choose a spouse and a person in our lives. And so, if we haven't done the work to heal from what kind of parents we had, sometimes, a lot of times, subconsciously, we choose somebody that's very similar to that because it's comfortable, even though it
yeah,
might be really toxic. It's kind of
yeah,
like, I know how to play this role, even though it doesn't feel super healthy. I don't even know what healthy looks like because I wasn't raised in healthy. And so we choose that person and we think, hey, when you get married, this person's going to keep working on it, right? They're going to be dedicated, and whatever happens, we're going to keep working on it and being committed. That's not the case, and people don't always, work on themselves or work on the relationship. And so we end up basically married to one of our parents, sort of. And until we do that growth to really recognize, okay, I chose somebody that represented these negative traits. I actually have people whether it's an individual counseling client or when I run my divorce groups, I have people do what's called an imago workup, and I have them go through and list out positive and negative traits of both caregivers, what you did not receive as a child, and what you did to try to get that, and you fill it in, and boy, you start looking at, that's exactly who I chose. No wonder this has not worked. So that's what I see a lot in in a much deeper level than things like finances, in-laws, money, all of those things. So pick your poison, but if that's the case, it takes an awful lot of work to make that healthy.
how how can people escape that cycle of repetition and marrying their parent?
Well, I think it takes an awful lot of therapy, self reflection, work on yourself to recognize what's my part, taking accountability for your own part, kind of recognizing what are characteristics of good relationships. How do I want to show up in this? Is this person committed to self growth? Are they going to do the work to stick in this with me and be a healthy partner? I think it takes an awful lot of self reflection, all of this. How am I showing up in a healthy way? What do my relationships look like? Am I keeping my side of the street clean? I mean, there are so many things that go along with that. And I don't think we necessarily examine that until something's gone really wrong. And we feel almost at crisis. We're down on our knees saying, I don't know what to do. And then we start reflecting. At least that's how it happened for me.
Wow. What why do you think people are, because relationship is work,
Oh boy.
is work, and the worst thing you can do is sweep things under the rug,
Hmm.
because under the rug can only fit so much dirt.
Yep.
Why do you think people are too, and you tell me if they're scared or lazy or careless? Why is it that the work is not being done by one party or
Hmm.
by both parties up until the point like you said, even in your case with your past marriage, like
Mhm.
was that what was the issue like? Was it the lack of effort? Was it the fear? Was it the not knowing any better? What do you think that was?
Mhm. I think lack of effort, and also, just on my part, as a therapist, I'm a very naturally curious person about myself, and I'm very self-reflective, and I want to work on myself. And if I choose somebody that's not wired that way, it's basic the way I see it, Alex, is if you choose somebody as a partner who's not dedicated to self-growth, you get the best version of that person in the beginning, because that's when people show up their best. And if they stop working on themselves, or they never did, that's what you're working with. And so I think laziness, I think fear, I think just being a counselor who feels comfortable working with men. A lot of men don't feel comfortable in counseling, they don't know what to expect. I work with a lot of first responders, and there are different levels of, the stigma, and it means that, all kinds of names that you're called if you go to counseling. And,
Yeah,
it's just like,
you
I'm
can't
not
tell us
there
what
for
to
that.
do. You can't
Yeah.
tell us what to do. We tell you what to do.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Okay.
can tell you all about as a first responder peer support counselor. Man, there's not a group that I see when I do my public speaking that acts the same way besides first responders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I know they're dying on the inside. And I know
Yes.
they got questions, but this is what I get.
Right.
And I was like, all right, I know you knuckleheads. I've was you
Mm-hmm.
just not so long ago. So okay, can
Mm-hmm.
continue. Just if you continue on that path, it's not gonna take you to the right place. And so
Right.
I used to be like, I used to plead with them and try to prove them wrong. What I do now is I just sort of give my own life examples and make fun of myself,
Mm-hmm.
show them that I'm human. Because every first responder, every police officer is a little boy or a little girl that haven't healed the childhood trauma or trauma they had, and now they have a badge and a gun.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 99.9% of us. I'll be the first one to say that was me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it can be a recipe for disaster because we see so many things out there as first responders, as law enforcement officers. Some of the things that I saw reminded me of my own childhood.
Mm-hmm.
I had a very violent childhood. I've seen things that at 9 years old, I've seen my father stab my mother. Okay, I don't think that's something a 9-year old should see, but to me that was normal. To me, domestic violence, physical abuse, that was normal. And it's really easy to go down that slope, slippery slope. I I I was a very violent kid growing up. Even as a young adult, nobody taught me. I was very toxic. Yeah, that's probably the first person I would ever, use that term to say that I was toxically masculine. But I was.
Mm-hmm.
I was. I'm pretty sure some of my ex-girlfriends, especially the first ones, first few, would definitely agree with that. Um, it takes effort, it takes self-realization, it takes hard work to recognize your own flaws
Yes.
before it escalates to the point where they either end up in prison, hospital, or dead, or divorced, and so many first responders end up in divorce. We're like, I think we're still number one. You tell me the statistics. Last time I checked,
Mm-hmm.
last year we're still number one
I believe so.
in suicide and divorce. Yeah, and not to add that our longevity after retirement is only like 5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that that's a horrible way to look at it. And yeah, yeah, it's just something about the job. Well, I know what it is about the job as a first responder now that kills us on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
I know I figured out what it is,
Mm.
but it's not healthy. It's not.
Do you want to answer that one, Alex? You said you've figured out what it is. I'm curious to hear your thoughts, unless that takes us on a whole different tangent.
Oh, I'm comfortable talking about it. I talk about it all the time. The biggest problem with first responders is that, first of all, it's a job that requires alpha male and alpha female traits.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, first of all, I don't think being an alpha female is very healthy for a woman. Okay, I think a woman in her natural should be a feminine, nurturing person. I would like a feminine, nurturing person as a woman for me, as a
Mm-hmm.
masculine man.
Mm-hmm.
Alpha mentality for men can be toxic because it's the type, it's when the competition goes from a healthy competition to an unhealthy competition. It is gossip. It
Mm-hmm.
is utilization of humor to the extreme
Yes.
because we're not allowed to cry. We're not allowed to show emotion. I mean, how dare I when a person's dialing 911 when their life is at the point where they can't handle it themselves. They need our help. I can't show up and start crying with them. Well, maybe
Yeah.
at the end when the situation is resolved and everything is code for, okay, I can sympathize, right? But I can't be there and I can't because they rely on me. I have to be the solid rock.
Yes.
Then we take that moment and we disperse it across our professional life and our personal life, where humor and sarcasm becomes an everyday deflective routine, where shit talk is a normal part of your day because we don't know how to talk differently.
Mm-hmm.
We utilize the humor to the extreme. We will die for each other. We will drive 90 miles an hour when there's an officer screaming for help. We will bust through doors and jump into fire and with bullets flying. But after everything is done and code for, what do? We shred each other to pieces through sarcasm and shit talk and gossip. And to me, that is more toxic than anything else because the stigma is there. You
Mm-hmm.
don't cry, you don't complain, you don't say a prayer, you don't act weak. You know, it's all about how good can you shoot, how good can you fight, how many goals can you get, this how fast can you drive. I've done all that. I've done all that. It didn't make me happy. It made me
Right.
miserable. It made me miserable. And I realized that not everybody understands that because I was at the point of my life where I was sitting and telling my friend, like, listen, man, I'm one of the best shooters in the department. I know how to fight. I have my own place. I'm a bachelor. I have more goals than the days in the week. I am not happy.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, dude, you're crazy. You have what most guys out there would want to have. What are you talking about? And that's when I realized this is not for everybody. It's not for everybody.
Yeah.
So I had to exit that sphere, that culture, and seek help from somebody else who was able to understand me.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when all the women had to go, all that stigma had to go, all the machismo had to go, all the toxic traits had to go,
Yeah.
and the self mastery had to kick in, and
Mm-hmm.
patience, and empathy, and less less judgment, being judgmental, and all of that had to go. Otherwise, I would probably be looking at the barrel of my gun one more time,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to do that.
I'm so glad that you had that wake up call, and that it changed you, and you changed you to deal with it differently because you're here now.
Yeah, I can't explain why this happened to this day. I don't know. I tell my wife, I'm like, I don't know what it is it about you, what made me do it, but I did it. It was like a Holy Spirit guiding me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't even know why I did what I did. It's just I just listened because I think I desperately needed help,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, that's what happened. Now you
That's
did this. What did
beautiful.
you mean by that when I was talking? You said me.
Heart. I was talking about, you were missing the heart, right? The
Yeah,
heart connection. It's like you had all of the things. People saw you as you've got everything, but you didn't have peace, and you didn't have the love aspect correct at the time. like the nurture and the
At,
good.
at the time, you know, I think I need more nurturing now than I did back then because I finally had a woman who showed me what it's like to be a nurturing woman. Although I haven't been missing her for the last 3 months, I'm hoping to be back. But at the time, what it was for me was a lack of purpose.
Okay.
That's how Purpose Over Pleasure podcast came about.
Mm-hmm.
Lack of purpose,
Mm-hmm.
and that is what men need. We
Yes.
should have started with that. That's what men
Yes.
need. That's where toxic masculinity stems from. Lack of purpose. Men need purpose in their life. I think people in general, but I think women can find purpose in their children, and I can give birth to a child, so
Mm-hmm.
I need to have a purpose, a healthy purpose, a purpose. Period.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that lack of purpose describes a lot of the issues that happen when first responders retire, right? There is talk about a change, a huge loss of identity, and everything that goes along with that purpose. What is that purpose if my only purpose was my career? And it's not just law enforcement, it's everything. We need a purpose that goes way beyond career. So,
Do you think lack of purpose is what also ruins relationships sometimes?
absolutely, it can be. Hmm. It's a good way to look at it. I think two strong people that have purpose and are really working on themselves and are dedicated to each other to me, I just think that's incredible. And what more energy can you ask for than two people that are aligned in that way, and are also willing to work on it. I think one of the gifts of positive femininity is being able to nurture and influence. So, being able to see where things are going wrong in a relationship and that communication is breaking down. And the question when it comes to couples counseling, will men listen to that and be willing to go work on it before it's too late? So many times what I see, Alex, is people finally come to counseling, but it's been years of communication breakdown, and there are bitter struggles and dynamics that are so deep that these people kind of hate each other. And so if it's getting to that point, it's unless you're willing to really look at yourself and do that work, it's really hard to save that. And it takes two people that want to do that. So it's uncomfortable to go to counseling, but as couples, but it's worth it.
What do you think men do most that ruins relationship, and what do you think women do most that ruin relationship? Is it the
Mm-hmm.
same thing for both, or is it separate things that different genders do that
Mm-hmm.
pushes them away from each other? Can you elaborate on that in your experience?
Yep. So, in my experience, one of the most common patterns I see is we as women tend to criticize. And so, if a man is shutting down, withdrawing, not talking, we get upset. And if it doesn't change, we tend to pick. We criticize. Come on, talk to me, right? And we keep going, which makes men in general kind of stonewall a little bit more, get a little bit more defensive. Would you get off my case? And right. And one begets the other and they make each other worse. And so it's one of the biggest things I think couples can learn is when you're in that negative and you're both kind of nasty in an argument, take a break. And whoever asks for the break, if you're getting flooded, come back and say, I feel ready to talk calmly. I didn't want to say anything negatively. I feel ready to talk calmly now. Do you feel ready? And boy, pride, I think too, is a huge problem with relationships. So it's if you can look at yourself and say, you're right, I was criticizing. I was being critical. I was, you know, not empathizing and understanding where you're coming from to that's the biggest dynamic I see. We call it criticize and defend, or that's the biggest pattern,
Okay,
or pursue
criticize
and withdraw,
from a woman and defend from a man.
or pursue from a woman and withdraw for a man, right? And it keeps going, and so the more she pursues, the more he withdraws.
Why do you think men withdraw so much?
Well, I love that you asked that. I think for a lot of men, it's overwhelming. And I think for young boys, a lot of boys are not taught how to identify emotions, how to deal with emotions. And if you've got an angry woman coming at you saying, you need to talk about your feelings and we need to talk about this right now, I think a lot of men, when I work with them, I'm teaching them when you're getting flooded because you're in conflict, that's the worst time to talk. And it's okay to say, I need a break. I'll come back and talk to you when I feel calm. And to say, if she keeps coming, it's like, I'm not ready to talk right now. I promise I will come and talk to you. Let's try this in a calm way. And so that's where yelling starts. And, boy, then you have two people trying to out yell each other. And that's what, when we're flooded, we're like cavemen and cavewomen. We just want to win. That's a dangerous combination.
Okay, I love that you talk about emotions. Let me ask you about emotional maturity. How does that play into relationship?
Gosh, huge, huge,
Tell them, Jennifer, because I always keep telling them, but you're a professional, so maybe they'll listen to somebody with a degree.
huge. I mean, so emotional maturity, to me, one of the biggest components of that is accountability. And so if I'm not willing to admit that I was wrong or I was acting in a relationship in a way that was unhelpful, to be able to apologize and own it and say, you're right, I need to work on that. Goodness sakes, where do you go from there?
So putting ego aside, my question was putting the ego aside when we're talking
Oh,
about emotional maturity.
ego. Oh my goodness. The ego is responsible for so much of what we're talking about. Toxic traits, right? Difficulty in relationships, lack of personal growth. The ego is the biggest killer of that.
My question to you was, can you elaborate on toxic femininity?
Absolutely. So, in my opinion and experience, toxic femininity is when women see all masculine traits as negative. And so, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. But I see a lot of this happening when maybe women get hurt by men. And so it becomes a stereotyped response of all men suck. I hear this a lot because I run divorce groups. And so there's a reason I run groups that are co-ed, because I think in a group setting, women and men can learn from each other and recognize the men are just as hurt as the women are when they go through divorce. Now, these are not couples; these are individuals. But it's this response of everything everything that hurt me is because of masculinity, and we need to just get rid of masculinity. Fuck that. That's terrible. That's a terrible idea. We need masculinity and we need femininity. And so that's the way I see it. And I also see sometimes as women, particularly if there's a father wound, I think like I said, we tend to choose somebody that's just like dad, who maybe has some of those toxic traits. We get into that relationship, that man hurts us, right? We see a pattern. Okay, well, my dad was toxic, my husband was toxic, right? Let's say that we get out of that relationship, we get into another relationship with a man. Well, that was toxic, so men are toxic, right? Because when we are traumatized, our brains want to keep us safe. And so they look for the common factors instead of thinking through, wait a minute, I chose these people. This is some of the work I've had to do. I chose these people to be in my life who, you know, fit a certain mold that I was familiar with that wasn't necessarily healthy. And then continuing to choose that same person reinforce this idea that, you know, those male partners were bad. They were bad, right? Instead of, we're all bringing our own baggage. We all have our own trauma and sometimes mental illness that we struggle with. And it's not necessarily that that person is toxic, it's that we had an unhealthy relationship dynamic. We weren't healthy for each other. And so to just want to try to get rid of an entire, gender or masculinity or femininity, it's just, we overshoot it when we're traumatized because we want to try to stay safe. And that's also the ego. And right, instead of looking at men actually get hurt, men have their own responses to trauma. If they're not doing the work, then, men are responsible for that. Women are also responsible for these stereotypes that start happening. And I think social media tends to, ooh, they just fan the flames of this, and they like to make it look like all men are narcissists. If you had a bad relationship, it's because he's a narcissist. Well, how often are these people actually fitting into the diagnostic criteria to be a narcissist versus it was an unhealthy dynamic and both people had some negative reactions to it? We don't show up well in relationships if it's unhealthy, both sides. That's my take on all of it.
Do you think we have way too much labeling going on in society nowadays? And
Mm-hmm.
that's like a defensive or deflecting factor to not recognize your own flaws?
Yes. Yes. And I
Yeah.
think some of these, one of my guy friends sent me something from some social media, and it was talking about how hiking too much is a trauma response. I don't think so. I don't think so. Some of these experts on social media are not experts. They've never done research on this. They don't know what they're talking about. So,
I, Jesus, man. Anything nowadays can be a trauma response.
right.
It's interesting how you mentioned that sometimes women, well, people in general repeat the pattern of not recognizing what got them into the situation before, and they're doing it again and again. I think that is a very toxic trait. I think one trait that women have more than men do is they think they can fix a man.
Mm-hmm.
My mother thought she could fix my dad. My sister thought she could fix my brother-in-law. My wife thought she could fix at least one of her past partners.
Mm-hmm.
And what men have is we settle. We settle without. When women settle, sometimes they make a decision to settle, but then they blame men for it
Mm-hmm.
eventually.
Mm-hmm.
When men settle, we blame ourselves and we destroy ourselves from within because we don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, we kiss the bottle, or we escape, or we start cheating, or we eventually ended up taking our own lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I think both are toxic. Both are not healthy.
Yes.
But what irritates me the most, especially, and there's a point in my life where, like last year, I was making so many reaction videos, and in response to these feminine women who are just absolutely delusional, like saying like we don't need men, we'll be okay. I'm like, do you not understand that 95% of this infrastructure is built by men? Or some of them say, well, I only date top G's. Yeah, well, that's like one guy in 100,000. And that's
Yes.
not the guy who's responsible for building infrastructure of the entire city. That's 99,999 other men who build the roads, power station, electricity, water pump, trash disposal, and everything across. And they have this delusional thing that they want a top G, like Andrew Tate says, but not every man is a top
Mm-hmm.
G.
Mm-hmm.
There are more good men out there who are willing, who do the work every single day, who love, who care, who are honest. And yeah, they're not making hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars, but they're the ones who providing for us. I would even
Mm-hmm.
go further and say I'm the one sitting right here in my studio and I have power in my studio and AC is running and everything is nice and dandy because there's men out there who make this happen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I'm sitting here and I'll be sitting here criticizing them that no, I never will. And that's to me borderline is delusional. And then they
Mm-hmm.
have these crazy standards of and expectations of like I don't know where they came from. It used to boggle my mind. And I stopped making those reaction videos. Instead, I switched to like an educational mode from entertainment to more education to in hopes that
Mm-hmm.
maybe I can educate some of those women. And but do you know where that came from? Like how is it that so many younger women out there that have these delusional expectations or unrealistic expectations of life from men? Like how do we get here?
Hmm. What a great question. And just side note, as just one woman in the whole world, but give me the everyday, hardworking, loving, good man over the top G any day. That a thousand times better. But my first kind of gut feeling is this idea on social media that you deserve top 1%, you deserve XYZ, and what people don't understand is, oh, well, okay, well, you coming from the top 1% to choose this top 1%? I mean, what are your qualifications?
Oh man, some people are not gonna like this answer, but I love it. I love it.
It's like it's entitlement. What makes if that's what I want, then I better be willing to work for that myself to be in the top 1%. That's just the way I see it. So sometimes I see this one's going to get me in trouble too, Alex, but I'm going to just put it out there. But once in a while, I work with women that will say, well, I want a guy that's going to, provide for me and do this and that. And I'm thinking, okay, but so in the meantime, how are you going to provide for yourself? And what are you bringing to the relationship? Right? Are you working on yourself and what you're bringing? Or are you just focused on, I need this guy that's got this, and this? There's that trust fund video. You've seen that
Hmm.
one,
Hmm.
right? It's like that's what we're entitled to versus work on yourself. Be a good version of yourself to attract that type of partner. That's the way I see it. Nobody's
Yeah.
entitled to anything.
No, nobody's entitled. And you know what's funny? I'm yet to see a single video of a guy out there saying we don't need women. Not one. And if
Not
a
one.
guy out there ever says we don't need women, another guy will slap him across the face and tell him to wake up. But we're gonna do that to each other. You know, they don't. Instead, they'll be like, "Yes, girlfriend, leave that man. He's toxic. You're worth so much better."
Mm,
And when they cause their girlfriends to break up with their men and become miserable again, they don't realize that that same girlfriend will turn around and leave you for another man.
yeah, that is to me the epitome of toxic
Yeah.
femininity. I don't
Thank
want
you.
that in my life. that
Thank
that's
you.
not positive, healthy. To me, a positive woman is getting to know her girlfriend's husband and being a supporter of him too, and also, hopefully the guy shows up in a good way as well.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, one of the things that we established in our relationship is rule number one: we never take any kind of relationship problems outside of our family and our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Rule number
Mm-hmm.
one: never. Do everything you possibly can to solve the problem just with the two of you.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had a few situations in our life already in these last 3 years where we were on our own, just me and my wife, just me
Mm-hmm.
having to figure it out. Rule number two of relationship is if we have to venture out of our relationship to ask for an advice, then we make sure we go to a person that will bring us together, not set us apart.
Yes.
Because most of the time, what do? We go to mom, we go to dad, sister, best friend, girlfriend. What do? They love you, so they're gonna be like, "You're right. Screw him or screw her. You can do so much better." You would. What does that do? That doesn't help the person. Maybe makes the person feel better, but it separates it from the partner. Versus you go
Exactly.
to somebody who wants to bring you together. You tell them, "Listen, calm down. Put your ego aside. Stop thinking with your emotions. That's your husband or that's your wife. These are your responsibilities. This is what you should do. Come back together." That's like
Yes.
that doesn't exist anymore nowadays. What happened to that?
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I think it does exist. It's not newsworthy. It's not showing up because it's healthy. And I love finally at my point in life, I'm almost 50. I have that in my life where I have positive people that can be gentle with me, but also call me out. And I don't want people that are revving up my ego like, you're right, girl, screw him or whatever. I don't want that because I want to be able to see where my blind spots are. It's hard. Our ego hates it, but you don't want people that are yes men and yes women. I don't want
Hmm.
that.
Hmm. What is ego?
What is ego? Gosh, what a question. To me, it's the protector of our pride.
I think so. I think it's a defense mechanism.
Hmm.
I think it's a defense mechanism, but without the safety lever.
What do
It's a
you mean?
defense mechanism that we have to control. Otherwise, it can act like an immune deficiency, right? Autoimmune disease, and it will attack your own body.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
I think that's my opinion. And what do I know?
No, that's a great metaphor. I love that.
Because it's there to protect, sort of. I mean, for the most
Sort
part,
of. Hmm.
keeps you alert, keeps you on your toes,
Hmm.
makes you critical up to a
Hmm.
certain point. But if you don't control it, you'll start attacking your own body,
Agreed.
your own self.
Agreed. And we have to be aware that it's there and that when we're operating from that ego mode, to me, if our pride gets hurt, ego shows up to try to protect us. And that, but that's not usually very helpful.
What advice would you give? You're as a person who as a mother, as a therapist, as a professional, as somebody who's in your field and work with hundreds of thousands of people. What advice or advices would you give to couples when it comes to relationship?
Hmm.
And then better yet, what non-conventional advices would you give
Oh,
to the couples in a
okay.
relationship?
Non conventional. Hmm. I mean, I'm not, let me talk my way into non conventional because I think the first things that come to mind, I'd say the biggest one is be willing to admit when you're wrong and be willing to talk about it and be committed to talking through what's happening and what you need. That's probably the biggest thing. And just, you know, remaining vulnerable enough to just say whatever it is that's going on and what you need from each other is huge. And being committed to that, saying I'm never gonna, just uh, leave you alone to a point where it's, um, like I'm always gonna work on it. To me, that's the biggest thing you can promise somebody is I will always work on it and I'll always show up for you no matter how frustrated I get in a moment. That dedication to it and leave my pride aside and learn from you. Relationships are assignments for optimal growth. That's Gabrielle Bernstein, but we can learn a lot from our partners if we're open to it and if they're safe and not throwing it in our faces, right?
Okay. How see you know what my one of my biggest problem is, and I'm not afraid to admit that, is that I always sort of look at the relationships, or at least I used to. I'm still sometimes faced with that dilemma. I feel like relationship have to be reciprocated,
Mm-hmm.
and one of my biggest problems right now is that because I'm taking over all the roles responsibilities as a provider and a protector of my house, and I understand that my wife soon is not going to be able to work either. She has to leave her business, and I want her to raise our child. I
Mm-hmm.
do. I don't want to give my child to this absolutely disastrous educational system in the state. I chose her to be the mother of my children because of her character traits. So it's only fair that I'm gonna take over everything and the providing and provisioning, right? But at the same time, I need her to work for me. I need her to help me in business. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's only fair because I'm at the point in my life where I need help.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I need help, and I think it's not fair if she doesn't work for me now and she doesn't submit to me as a woman because, like it or not, even the Bible says the woman had to submit to a man. Now, I don't mean it in the way that be my slave and do whatever I tell you to do. No, I have to be the type of leader for her to submit to me. Okay, it's a yin and yang.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm battling through is, and I understand, and I need to have patience, is that I feel like I'm on my own, but I have to remind myself, okay, that's just the first trimester, and then okay, pregnancy, maybe sometime after that until I finally get her back. And at the end of the day, I chose to have a baby with her, and then that's her first one. So Is it wrong of me to expect her to work for me and with me and have to help me with my business and or is it or should I just have more patience in the meanwhile during this time, or should I just not expect anything at all, and it's wrong for me to expect her to submit and work for me? What do you think?
Mm,
And you
I
can be as
think,
honest as you want.
sure. I don't think it's wrong to expect that she's going to show up for you. I think when it comes to her working for you, does it bring out negatives in the two of you as a couple, or are you able to keep doing that in a positive way? And I
um
have
I
more to
think,
add after you answer that.
yeah, I think what I need to work on is when to take off my husband
Hmm.
hat and put on my boss hat, and then take off the boss hat and put on my husband hat.
Right.
That I need to work on.
Okay. And it's hard for couples that work together. It brings different dynamics they're just like you just talked about. Are you able to step out of the business aspect and show up for each other as spouses? But I also think pregnancy and then having a child really changes dynamics, because for a lot of women, the child becomes kind of it's so much of a focus, and then men sometimes kind of get left behind, like, what's my role here? How am I supposed to show up when your main purpose is the baby now? And so there's a book from, I was going to mention this to you, Alex. I think it's called Baby and Me, and it's from John Gottman. John Gottman is a couples counselor, just researcher, kind of like the guru in couples counseling. But I think those dynamics change. And so many men get called into feeling like I need to provide and protect so much. And women are saying, well, how you're never home, right? And I need you because I'm with this baby all day and this is really hard. And the man is saying, but I'm providing. And this is a lot of pressure because now I'm providing for both of you or all of you. So I think it's just being able to talk about what those expectations are and find some sort of compromise that works for both of you. Otherwise, it starts creating, bitterness and resentment, and we don't want that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been warned about it by my friend who just recently had a baby, and it's not his first time. He said, "Watch, man, you're gonna lose your wife to the baby. You're gonna lose your best friend." And up until maybe this week, I didn't realize that. So now I'm like, it's tough. It's tough. Like what the feeling of being alone at the point of your life when you really need your partner is tough.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough, and I think, man, I should probably dedicate the whole episode to this at the end of this 9 months, because I did not expect this. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought my friend was joking. But there should be some kind of blueprint for men out there who have their first baby, man, because this shit is not fair.
Yes, yes, it's
It's gonna be like, yeah,
such a change. And I think, to me, one of the best things that you can do, Alex, is early on. I don't know how much support you guys are going to have, but really good support that you guys trust that can watch the baby so that you and your wife can go on regular dates and maintain the couples aspect. Because honestly, and just having gone through divorce myself, one of the most important things is to maintain the couples, to maintain that marriage is one of the best things you can do for your kids. And people think, well, I need to put all of this energy and everything into the kids. Well, what do you have at the end of it? If you end up getting divorced, then kids have to deal with that, right? So focus on the relationship, and I hope that both of you can see that and how important it is.
yeah,
And take time, go on dates. It's so important. And don't talk about the kid the whole time.
or work,
Or work. Yes.
or work. Yeah, I'm guilty of not checking out from work,
Mm-hmm.
and having business mentors who are very successful in what they do, but people don't understand that people who are so successful in business, they are a different breed. They
Mm-hmm.
think different, they walk different, they act different, and I have very high standards, not only for others but also for myself,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't lower my standards for anybody. and I realized that I can't even. I'm having a hard time lowering my standards for even my wife or my
Mm-hmm.
family because I have high standards for myself. And so it's a constant battle between the logic and the emotion
Mm-hmm.
because I have to constantly switch off and understand that okay, this she doesn't need my problem solving, she just needs my ears.
Yes.
And between my ears, there's 10,000 thoughts a minute. I
Yes.
have a hard time meditating. I don't know. I don't.
Same.
I can't. The second I wake up, my brain is wired to the second I crash out. It's just, and it's a lot. It's a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
it's something I need to work on, but it's tough.
Absolutely. And I wonder too, a couple things come to mind when you share that, which is number one, I don't know that you necessarily need to lower your standards, but are you able to keep the work stuff in the work container and very intentionally shut that off so that you can show up as a husband? And also keeping in mind that she's already the interesting thing about women, once we become pregnant, our identity starts shifting right away and people start paying attention to, oh, you're pregnant, how far along are you? And we start that process 9 months earlier, and men show up, it's just different. Our identities change at different rates. And so it might be not that you have to lower your standards for her, but recognize she started that identity shift already. And so she's focusing more on that, and you're still maybe focusing on work.
I did in the shift from a wife to a mother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think a lot of young couples are who are going through this would definitely relate to all of that. But I also think that I mean I was told that men less capable of me have became fathers more than once, so I shouldn't be out here worrying. But again, it falls back on the same high standards I have for me, I guess, because I'm so afraid to fail
Mm-hmm.
that my fear of failure is bigger than my will of success. And they say it's a good thing, but it's also like a double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain types of people. I've accepted myself for who I am. I know I'm not an average person in the sense that I'm not better than anybody, but I'm not an average person.
Mm-hmm.
And like Bejo says, there's sheep and there's lion,
Mm-hmm.
and lions at some point of their life have to accept the fact that they're lions.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they're going to be lions acting like sheep, and that's the worst thing you can do to yourself. And my entire life, I've struggled with not fitting in. And I don't know if you know my story, but after 20 years, I finally, healed my biggest childhood trauma last year. Is letting my mother know that I'm adopted.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't know that.
20 years, I carried that
Wow.
within me, and my entire life, I never fit in anywhere. Not in high school, not in college, not in different groups, not in police academy, not in. I don't fit in. Like I'm not your typical guy. I don't go out. I don't watch sports every Sunday or Monday. I don't care about football. Well, there's only one team I care about, it's Dallas Cowboys, only because they're making me money. Um, uh, but I don't go out drinking with the boys. I don't, womanize. I don't sit like I don't do any of that stuff. And I always had a hard time fitting in. And there's only a very few men out there that I can relate to, but they're also different. And some would even go further. I said some of them are fucked up on the head because you have to be. But I can't. I can't. I just can't blend in with the rest of the crowd. And I think it's because
Mm-hmm.
of it's a blessing and a curse. But I've
Yes.
accepted myself for who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Finally. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think the fact that you think so much about it and worry about failing is just that's part of who you are, and it's part of your gift. And also, I would worry if you weren't worried about being a good father. It's such an important role, and so much of your work, Alex, is being a good man and a good father and trying to teach people this and mentor and coach. So Absolutely. It makes so much sense why you have so much pressure about this. And I think just being a parent that's experienced and has gotten two kids launched and they're good, good humans, you're going to fail at little things, but you're always going to show up and you're not going to bring stuff like, domestic violence and craziness and chaos into your world. It's just going to be little things. And your child is going to know that you're there and you're dedicated and you put so much into these relationships right off the bat. That's a huge success. That's huge. So
Thank
give
you.
yourself some credit.
Yeah, that's another thing I'm not good with. I'm
Yeah.
not good with giving myself credit. I'm not good with relaxing or giving myself credit. Um, and it's only recently I realized that I don't really know how to take a compliment. But I was listening to this podcast episode with this priest, and he wrote a book about David. David,
Mm-hmm.
from King David from the Bible, and he talks about like, listen, when you don't accept a compliment, or when you constantly say, "No, it's not me, it's just God," it's almost like, no, you're doing a dishonor to God for giving you that gift.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you're shutting down the person who's giving you a compliment, and you're shutting them down, so they're not going to give a compliment to anybody because you're not accepting their compliment. Because,
Mm-hmm.
for example, when I go to Toastmasters, right, or whenever I go public speaking, I always ask God, like, Father, listen, I'm not here to be the best. I'm here to change people's lives. So use
Mm-hmm.
me as a tool to deliver your message. Same thing in Toastmasters, and I've won best speaker countless of times. I lost track of how many. I'm not saying this that I'm the best. I'm saying that I don't care. I care about speaking my message to the people from the
Yes.
heart, to the point
Yes.
where I am better off speaking impromptu from my heart. I do better than versus when I write the outline and I follow it.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. And so people always tell me like, "Oh man, you're so good. Oh, you're natural. Oh, you have a talent." And I'm like, "Nah, nah, it's not me. It's not talented. Not me. It's all God. It's not me." And so the priest was saying like, "Nah, it's not your ego. Accept the compliment, thank him for the compliment, but at the same time, inside of you, you give praise to God for giving you that gift. Because if you're not, he's going to be like, well, this fool doesn't appreciate the gift I gave him, so I'm not going to give
Right.
it to him, you know.
I
And then
love
that
it.
person can take it in an offensive way because be like, well, I complimented him, he shut me down. I'm never going to compliment anybody again. So
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of unfair, and that's always been like that. I just never give myself credit until the years pass by, and I'm like, man, I've achieved what I wanted to. I lived the life that I wanted to live. Maybe it's time to appreciate it and just slow down a
Mm-hmm.
little bit because otherwise, what's the point? What am I doing this
Right.
for?
Right. And it's, if you think about it, it's a good way to shift into fatherhood too, because you're going to need to put all of the work stuff aside and show up and be present. And so, yeah, I think it's hard to do, and I think some of that relentless uh, hard work and never enough. I think certain aspects of that are really essential for being a good entrepreneur, and also, how much do you want to show up in your personal life and also have that legacy and a good marriage? And so I agree, it's hard to shut it off. My mind is the same. I'm always thinking, I'm always available, sometimes too much for clients. And I have to be able to shut that down and show up for the people in my lives. Otherwise, if I die tomorrow, is it worth it? I've
Yeah.
had to change that this past year. So
How's
it's
that?
hard. It's hard. My kids call me out on it.
Ooh. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, mom, you're too busy. So I
Ouch.
marked off Fridays for the next, I don't know, 8 weeks. I'm a grandmother, so I'm working on it. It's hard.
Yeah. It sucks being called out by the ones you love the most.
I trained them to do that to me, though. I want honest, open feedback, and so they'll call me out, and I'll call them out. I think you'll probably be the same.
Yeah. I'll be like calling you one day. Hey, Jen, what do I do?
They
My
just
child just called me out on my bullshit.
my ego hurts.
My ego hurts. but I'm doing it for them.
Exactly. I'll be
Oh,
ready for the call.
oh man, shoot, I don't know. I don't know.
Hmm.
But
So much good stuff.
yeah, I mean, listen, this is a wonderful episode. I
Thank you.
honestly feel
It's
like I hope I provided value to you,
yes.
answer your questions, because you provided an immense value to me.
Thank
Uh,
you.
you can bill me for this therapy session later.
Oh no. No, this is so good, Alex. It's been so good to chat with you, and yeah, I just appreciate the way you come across and being open and, honest and vulnerable about some of this stuff. Thank you for trusting me with it. And yeah, this has been great. It's just flowed so easily.
Likewise, thank you, thank you. I would like to point out that, and this is for my viewers and my listeners, I think therapy is a great thing. I've been doing therapy for many years now, and I believe in it, especially when you have a gem of a therapist. And I can already tell you, you're one of those therapists that I would, trust and come to. I'm blessed and lucky enough to have a couple of therapists in my life that I've dealt with that
Hmm.
really helped me out a lot. Because nowadays there's so many therapists out there who shouldn't be therapists.
Yep.
But I think more people should come to people like you for help, and more people should come to people like you for help earlier and
Hmm.
sooner than later.
Hmm.
I can tell you have the knowledge and the wisdom and the experience. And some might say, well, how is that she can tell me how to be, married and have a relationship because she's divorced.
Yeah.
Maybe I feel like it's what you had to go through is what made you better as a therapist.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I share with couples, there are times when I share that with couples, Alex, I've gone through a divorce and I've seen what leads to that. And I don't want that for you. And you have the power to save this. If it's worth saving, if it's good, yes. Like, and I'm a cheerleader for them.
I think most people overestimate their wedding and underestimate their marriage.
Yes, I would agree 100%.
I've been to way too many weddings where that have ended in divorce.
Yeah. A
And
wedding is one night
wedding is
and
one
a
for
hundred thousand dollars.
for other people, for other people.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's just, but the create the to create the union between two people and make that union just bulletproof and worthy in the eyes of God. That's it's something that, there's another book, I'm sure you read it. This book, there's another book that changed my life, Outwitting the Devil.
Oh, I have not read that. I've read
Oh my God.
Napoleon Hill. I've
You
read other.
uh,
Okay.
I can ship it to you if you want. Matter of fact, no, let me get your address later. I'll ship this book to you from me, and I'll write a note on
Okay.
it. So this will
Thank
be
you.
my gift to you.
I would
Uh,
love that.
Napo-
Thank you.
Napoleon Hill. So I'll ship that to you.
Okay.
I feel like giving this book to my guests. That's one
Okay.
of the gifts that I give to the people who come to my studio.
I would love that.
It talks about it talks. First of all, that book is great. I can talk about it, dedicate the whole episode to that. But in that book, it talks about the union between a man and a woman, and then when a man and a woman form a union and they love each other and they're intentional, the devil cannot do anything. The
Hmm.
devil is helpless. There's nothing you can do to damage the family
Right.
and the relationship, or a man and or a woman.
Right.
And this book has changed my life. I've read it like multiple times. Already probably listened to it 4 or 5 times, and I will do it again and again and again. It's a fantastic book. Just
Wonderful.
it's crazy. Yeah, I'll send that over to you. But yeah, I mean, thank you for doing what
Yes.
you're doing. Thank you for
Thank you.
helping other people heal and have a chance at a relationship again.
Thank you too, Alex. And thank you for giving back in the way you do to young men and men in general. And I think your message is really powerful. So I appreciate this. And what a boy, the time flew. So
No, we did.
thank you.
Of course, my pleasure. But and for all my viewers out there, again, Jen, thank you for being, thank you for joining us, and I appreciate your expertise and your advice. And if you guys got any value, any positive value from this episode, please give it a like and share it with those who need it. Because I know for a fact there's more people who need to watch or listen to this episode than they don't, and me and you both know that. I'll
Yes.
be the first one to admit it. So thank you again, Janet. It was
Yes.
such an honor and a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Alex, for me too.
Appreciate that.
Bye bye.